Hello and welcome to the Vibrant MD podcast today. I am super happy to have Dr. Melo with me. She is a fellow family doctor, and we both studied English literature as well as all the science you need to become a doctor. So that's a fun crossover for the two of us. Some of you are seeing this on YouTube, but mostly everything should be obvious if you're listening on the podcast today too. So welcome, Dr. Melo. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Well, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself to start?
Yeah, so I'm a family medicine physician in Seattle, Washington, and I've been in practice for, gosh, I don't know, about 12 years now. And I also became board certified in obesity medicine last year because I really wanted to have more skills and tools to be able to help my patients with weight loss. And then after getting that certification, I added on actually a coaching certification as well, because of course, what we know is that it's not all or one thing, right? There are some folks who need more of a medical approach, or at least need some of the medical tools in order to be successful with weight loss. But also every single person who is struggling with weight and eating also really needs to be attention to stress and mindset. And that's really where those coaching tools come in as such a handy extra thing to add on.
Right. That's terrific. And actually, Dr. Melo and I both certified at the Life Coach School. So we have a way of thinking of things that is somewhat similar. So that makes it helpful. Today, I really wanted to talk about perfectionism. It's something I've seen a lot in Dr. Melo's work online. And so I wanted her to come and share that with you all. We're going to talk about weight loss, but most of you who are listening are busy professionals. So we're going to talk a little bit about how perfectionism shows up in work and how it can lead to problems of burnout and overwhelm. So let's start there, Dr. Melo. Can you tell us a little bit about how perfectionism happens at work and what that leads to?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who, is a professional, you're sort of automatically this high achiever, driven person. And generally along the way, most of us have acquired a habit of perfectionism. We may not have always been that way, but, the higher we've sort of, gone along in our journey, we often have, sort of picked up this mindset of, I need to control everything. I need to do everything just right. I need to outperform my peers, not always in a negative, terrible sort of competitive way, but just to move ahead, right? To get that promotion, to get into a training program or some other thing. Right. And so that habit of perfectionism gives us this illusion that we can control everything, right? Yeah. We can control our careers, we can control our family, our relationships, our eating and weight loss journey as well. And what other people think about us. Right. But the tighter that habit becomes, it really kind of becomes this really constricting, thing in our lives, this tight force in our lives. And it never actually produces the result of perfect. We might still be doing well, but we're often feeling more and more restricted as we move forward. Right. And we never quite make it to that goal that we want.
Yeah, I really agree. I remember being in medical school, and there was like this super high stress perfectionist group that I was sort of friends with. And if I wanted to do better, if I was thinking, my studying isn't that going that great, I would go hang out with them because the hours were long. We went through every single thing. There was
such and such a way. And yeah.
Yes. And I did do better on the test. So I'm like, well, maybe I should be more like them. Although when I hung out with them, I would wake up in the middle of the night, grinding my teeth. And, it's funny how you think, well, this will serve me. But, if it's at the cost of, there's a cost.
There's a
right?
cost, yeah. And it's not to say that it can't help you perform because, of course, it has been part of most of our journeys, right, to get where we are. But with that cost, with that tightness, that anxiety, rigidity, um, and and again, sort of chasing this illusion that we can control everything.
Yeah. And it bleeds out too. Like there's pieces, definitely for doctors, there's pieces where you want to be very as perfect as you can be. When you're looking at someone's lab work, you are going through and thinking, how can I help this person? And that piece needs to be there. But
Mhm.
then when you're in the break room or in the computer room writing out things, then that rigidity stays with you, but you don't need it there in the computer room, right? And I think that other professionals have the same thing. There's little pieces that really need that very fine attention, but
Mhm.
then it bleeds out and all of it becomes
Yeah.
that rigidity.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording about Brene Brown, and she talks about there being, a big difference, an important difference between striving for excellence, right?
Mhm.
And perfectionism. Like we can want to really, perform at a high level to do high quality work
Yeah.
without, falling into this trap of thinking if I make any mistakes, it's all off, everyone will know, I'll just be steeped in shame. And I think that's really important. And, a lot of studies will show that, for most of us, there's a small fraction of work that really needs to be, at a technically high level. A
Mhm.
lot of numbers will point to like 20%, of your work needs to be really, really high quality, high attention to detail, lots of effort into it. But a lot of the other things that we do don't require that level of scrutiny and detail. And, I think so many of us are probably living, with the other proportion of, like really worrying about the 80% and all the little details and hold this paper right and, put the label, I was thinking we have to label specimens, right? Like
Right, right.
put the little sticker on just right. And, all of those things which really don't matter.
Right, right. Yeah. As
But we
you
still
and I both
agonize
studied
over.
literature and did writing, and I remember writing notes and being like, my notes are beautiful. I have written the nicest paragraph. And I'm sure people were like, why did she write such a long paragraph? When all they really needed was the bullet points to find out what was going on if you were
Absolutely.
sharing a patient or, yeah.
Absolutely.
I've been
Yeah. And
hearing from
I've had
people.
a few physician clients. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, that's
I was
okay. That's okay. Go ahead.
gonna say, I've had a few physician clients who, have really gotten stuck about that and really become quite upset because they are so used to receiving a lot of praise for, their beautiful notes, their really, exquisite details. And I'm thinking of one doctor in particular, and she was an emergency room physician. So she
Mhm.
was seeing tons and tons of patients, writing these really elaborate notes and staying for hours and hours after her 12-hour shift to get it done. And, I asked her kind of what was that costing? What
Yeah.
was that doing to her life? Because she was also struggling with weight. And she was really, really, really reluctant to make any changes because she's like, well, the admitting hospitalist will be really upset with me if I don't have these notes because they love my notes. They love all the details. They love all the little things. And I'm just like, well, what is the cost? What is the cost of pouring that much effort in when that level of information is not, usually called for in that setting?
Right, right. And I have a client too who is in business and
Mhm.
has clients throughout the US and
Mhm.
Europe. And she said that really she's cut back to doing a lot more bullet points in her emails, even because she said,
Yeah.
you know, I used to do this long thing, but people opened that email and said, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read four big paragraphs. And now they love that she gets to the point with the 4 bullet points instead of the 4 paragraphs, and that's so much more help for her clients. So it's funny because she had to shift her mind away from the perfect email, because the perfect email, it turned out, wasn't that great for the person receiving it too, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Might have gotten gold stars in college for grammar, but that's not what we're doing anymore.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
no, it's so true. And there's so many little examples like that, right?
Yeah.
Where we're really overdoing it. You think about a busy professional working mom who agonizes about bringing treats to school. And oh, I don't hand make this if I don't, make the fanciest thing, if I, and there's just not room for that often when no one is really scrutinizing, or no
Yeah.
one that you are concerned about, shall I say, is really scrutinizing your decision to swing by the store and pick up some snacks.
Right, right. And so then we start feeling overwhelmed at work, like
Mhm.
our job is too big, and we're not, takes sucks the joy out of our work.
Absolutely, because again, we're kind of like sucked into this vortex of trying to control everything. And, we may be having good outcomes in a lot of places, but not in everything. And again, we have this mindset, well, I can control everything and I just need to work harder to control that other thing that hasn't quite fallen into line.
Mm.
But again, with this rigidity and this anxiety, which then affects our performance, and we just simply don't control all the things. If the pandemic has shown us anything, there's a lot that's out there to chance, right? We've had all kinds of supply issues with getting groceries into the store, and all of those kinds of simple things. But also, who would have predicted that we would shut down the world in that way? Everybody
Yeah.
have imagined, oh, well, suddenly we're not going places. Oh, we have to wear a mask every place we go. Oh, there's the initial vaccine mandates, and any number of other circumstances where we had so much lack of control. And I think that's certainly one of the reasons why we are in this heightened state of anxiety is, we have been, many of us, practicing this habit of perfectionism and thinking, I got this, I can do all this, I can do all of the things. And then this just really hit us sideways. Oh, I don't have as much control as I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember even just being very quiet about the fact that my family was not able to wipe down our groceries when the very beginning
I
everyone.
also did not wipe down my groceries.
I mean, we were working, we're working seeing patients, and that was a highly stressful thing, even just to find the masks that we needed in the beginning.
Oh,
And one of my sister-in-laws is texting me about wiping down the groceries. And I was just like, I don't think I can talk about this. Because there are only so many hours in the day.
there's only so many hours in the day. Yeah, no, I definitely skipped that one
Yeah,
too.
thankfully that wasn't necessary to keep us
Yeah.
healthy at the end. We figured out eventually. I like what you said about habit of perfectionism too. And I think that really leads into how perfectionism shows up in weight loss. So if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind talking about that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and I really think of it as a habit for a number of reasons. One is habits are acquired and habits can be changed. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a really important thing to recognize, because I think growing up, I was aware of perfectionism more as a trait, more as something that was fixed in somebody. Um, and,
Yeah.
and certainly somebody might be more predisposed to that, but I think for a lot of us, it's a habit, and one that often, has kind of developed over time and can be undone. But, the other thing, when we're thinking about it with weight loss, many of us have acquired the habit there of thinking that perfectionism, is kind of the way to go. Classic examples of that would be, okay, it's Sunday afternoon. Tomorrow is Monday, right? We're going to start a new week, and I'm going to do everything just right. This is going to be the week that it clicks in, and I'm just going to make all the right choices. I'm going to exercise an hour every day. And we just get into this kind of fantasy piece, and that often pops up around, Monday or, the first day of the month, or we're coming up on New Year's, right? The first day of
Right,
the
right.
year,
Yeah.
2023, my resolutions, I'm going to kick everything off. And that perfectionism, again, we're sort of thinking I'm going to have control over everything. I'm going to have control over everything that happens in my life. Every opportunity to eat or not to eat, every opportunity to exercise or not, all of those really important things, or sleep, certainly
Yeah,
for a lot of
yeah.
people, there are many circumstances where our best laid plans, don't turn out, right? We're up all night because we have a cold and we're coughing, or we have a sick child, or,
Yeah.
we get a phone call, or there's noise outside that can impact our ability to follow through on our decisions the next day. So if we're thinking, well, I didn't sleep well, and therefore I need a donut, and I'll work out later, but then the day kind of goes haywire, right? And so then we don't
Yeah.
work out, and suddenly, this little trigger of events, we haven't controlled anything, and therefore, it all went out the window.
Yes. And then we're at dinner, and so we just,
Might as well eat French fries,
yeah, yeah, might as well just have French fries because I didn't do the afternoon thing and I didn't do the morning thing. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I think it's a huge barrier. And I think it's just really important to recognize in ourselves, when we're trying to get to a healthier weight, or trying to change our eating habits and, in general, or exercise habits, when we go into it thinking, I need to have all the right answers, I need to do everything 100% perfectly, each and every day, each and every meal, we're really setting ourselves up for failure, because of course the person who we are when we've successfully lost weight and kept it off is somebody who knows that it's all about trial and error. It's all about, being able to do the best you can with what you have and where you are, and recommitting to that journey of becoming a healthier eater, becoming, someone who can maintain weight loss.
right, right. I remember a day where I'd eaten a normal breakfast. And then after lunch, I was really stressed out, and we had half a pan of brownies on the counter, and I ate a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my goodness, I hadn't done that in a long time. And then, but because I've been on this journey already, and know that perfectionism doesn't serve me, I just ate a regular dinner. And I've shared that story on another podcast episode, and what a boring story that is. But that's exactly what you want your eating journey to be, is boring.
Absolutely.
You want to
Absolutely.
enjoy foods and keep going. And I kind of, I don't know who came up with this term, but I love it. Compassionate perseverance for weight loss.
Hmm.
Where you just, where things are going to go wrong, but you just kind of keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the boredom part, because it is a little boring. It is a little boring to make decisions to, eat the healthy food when that exciting, dopamine surge that could come with eating the chips or the cake or whatever, is right there. But committing and saying, yeah, well, not today, today
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with my plan, and this is my plan. And letting our meals be, a little boring. Not that they don't taste good, not that they aren't foods that we feel good eating, but we're not constantly seeking, pleasure and excitement and, entertainment from our food,
Right.
which is also such a common habit that many of us have in the US. That we consider the food to be a big part of the experience of having fun, relaxing, celebrating, treating ourselves after, a hard day. I think so many people are so out of touch with their hunger because they're using so many other cues to determine, that they're going to eat.
Right. Right. And sometimes, with there being food everywhere too, sometimes at the morning meeting, you might need to eat something, but sometimes you need to look at the grocery store pastries and say, I'm not hungry. I don't need this to make the meeting better.
Right.
You
And
know?
yeah, it's not going to make, it's not going to make it that much better.
Right, right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and I think, yeah, that's so true too. That we're so surrounded by food all the
Yes.
time. And you think about somebody who's struggling with alcohol, alcohol is not a necessary substance for human existence, right? People can absolutely choose, I'm gonna be fully abstinent, I'm gonna go without any alcohol for the rest of my life. And that is okay. No one needs that alcohol to survive. But with food, we all of us have to learn, how am I going to be able to make, healthy food choices, the majority of the time? How am I going to learn how to change these eating habits and not get so hung up in, controlling every circumstance, or again, being very rigid and tight? Certainly there are many people who choose to, exclude full categories of food and can do that easily, and it's
Sure.
better for them. But a lot of us, if we tell ourselves, I can never have that food again, sometimes that is a big stressor, right? And really drives up our interest and desire for that food, which, you know, sends us
Yeah.
searching for it.
Yeah. Or to
So
have
again, that
mental anguish about
perfection.
going to a like have mental anguish about going to a family birthday party and whether or not you're
Mm,
going to have cake.
right.
You can lose weight and have cake at your niece's birthday party, and you can lose weight and eat rice because that's your cultural food. You can lose weight and have pizza on Friday night because if that is your joy, you can build a week around that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people should have what they want because otherwise, again, it feeds into the perfectionism. Like, well, I will be perfect and never have pizza.
Yeah.
But if you really love pizza, then what kind of life is that?
Right. Right. Yeah. Like, do we want it to be that way? Is that the cost? Um, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and
Mhm.
the diet culture of everything was low fat and ultimately high carb.
Right.
And, yeah, just this idealized version of everything. We'll just have all these diet foods, and we'll just
Yeah.
um never eat these real versions of things, and it's such a dissatisfying way of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really just doesn't suit for the long term, I find.
I really love what you said about perfectionism as a habit because it helps us look at ways or places that it shows up that it doesn't serve us.
Mhm.
Um, and not necessarily thinking of it as a personality trait because then we get the shame and blame thing going as well.
Right.
um,
Yeah, and that's another thing that Brené Brown talks quite a bit about in her books is, um, that perfectionism is really about shame avoidance. And so we were talking more about the control side of things, but really the desire to control everything is to avoid criticism, to, avoid feeling shame, which is, a feeling of there's something wrong with me, like I'm intrinsically wrong somehow. We are trying to, hide our flaws from people, to hide, mistakes that we've made, to hide areas of knowledge that we don't have. And again, this tight rigidity sort of thing, because, we're human beings. We have the full expression of emotions. We will sometimes feel shame no matter what. We will sometimes feel angry or scared or
right.
worried. And we can't go through life thinking we can confidently avoid all those negative emotions, but can we learn to be able to handle them? So instead of trying to avoid shame at all costs, learning how to compassionately care for yourself when you are experiencing shame or anger or fear, any of those emotions. It's a really important skill. And, of course, I'm sure that you've seen this as well with your work. When you work on undoing the habit of perfectionism and learning how to accept your emotions and care for them with compassion, if you're doing that in one area of your life, it spills over into other areas in the
Yeah.
best way, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, you put that in such a beautiful way. I love that. Well, thank you so much. I just want to kind of hit the high points here again for people listening. In our work, perfectionism, there's a 20% that might need that. And if you're finding that you're doing that, if you're using perfectionism and control and being so very good 80% of the time in your work, there's probably some spots you could find to let that go, which would make your day and your week and your month so much better. And then looking at how using it as a habit in our weight loss doesn't really serve us, really just brings more misery.
Mm-hmm. And
that just kind of having that compassionate perseverance where you just kind of keep going because things will go wrong. That is a really common way that people are able to sustain weight loss when they allow that. And looking at, I also love to look at the cultural pieces, that where our culture has told us that you have to be perfect to lose weight, or some of these other things that.
I mean, that's part of the perfectionist illusion as well, right? Is that once I've lost the weight, I will be happy all the time. I will, have the perfect house and it will be tidy and my kids will smile and be polite to everyone. And, it just kind of feeds in. I'll be happy when, which of course is not what happens, right? We all have ups and downs no matter what. That is just how life unfolds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Melo, for being here. Can you please let people know where they can find you on, you have a podcast as well, right?
I do have a podcast. It's called Ending Physician Overwhelm.
Sorry,
And
say that one more time because I was.
Ending Physician Overwhelm.
Nice.
And so I talk a lot about mindset, and and allowing emotions and kind of the difficulties that come up, and toxic perfectionism and people pleasing, and how all of those things feed into burnout. It is from the lens of physicians and people doing work in healthcare. But I know I have many listeners who aren't in those fields and still find the lessons to be helpful. So that's one place to find me. And then I also have a website, which is www.healthierforgood.com. And on that, I share, a little bit more about my coaching practice.
Great. And I will put the links to everything you sent me in the show notes as well. So if people want to just grab that, they can find you too. So thank you again. I appreciate you coming and sharing this with my audience.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a real joy.